stuff, but kind of want to just mix it up a little bit. And I haven't been playing very well in a league. But this is actually a video that I wanted to do for a while, because I've talked about a bunch of Akali builds, but I've never actually gone through what specifically they were. I've mentioned a bunch of items that were good on her. I never really talked about why or how or what items they synergize well with. So today I want to go through, I think I have, 7 builds? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to go through pretty much from best to worst in my opinion. So I mean, it's going to be a pretty long video probably, but I'm going to start with the best and end with what in my opinion is probably the worst builds overall. So if you just want to watch like the first part, then you can get what my opinion on the best one is, and you can kind of just skip the end. Or if you just want to see the troll builds and the fun builds, then you kind of skip past this first part and go towards the end of the video. Anyways, so we're going to start off with excuse me. We're going to start off with what my typical build is. So these are the 4 starts that I am willing to do. The easier the matchup, I tried to keep these in order on all of these for like highest priority to lowest priority, what you want most to what you want least, or like what you want to get away with if you can. So if you can get away with longsword, that gets you one step closer to your gunblade. So it's probably the greediest out of the builds, but it actually does work in a lot of matchups. Almost every melee matchup and matchups that have point and click abilities that aren't super oppressive, you can take longsword most of the time. If they have a lot of skill shots, for instance someone like Ari, then I almost always take boots. Against some AD matchups you can take cloth armor. If I'm against someone like Zed or Talon, I'll still try to get away with longsword. But if I'm against someone like Jace or Lucian, someone who can really oppress me in the early game, then I definitely want to start longsword. And lastly is Doran Shield. If they take, like, let's just say you're against like a LeBlanc with flat AP blues, definitely go with the Doran Shield. This is your safest option. However, it is the least greedy, the least. It's not going to get you anywhere closer to anything else. So I only do this when I have to. But there are some times where you do have to start Doran Shield, so it's always nice to have. Against Brand, it's also really nice because he has that burn damage, and this gives you a little bit of health regen. So my standard item, like these are my first backs, my first core builds, are always going to try and get my revolver first and my cutlass second. Since cutlass costs more now, it's really hard to get cutlass first. If you start longsword and like you don't have 1200 gold, or like you just have like a really early bag because you traded early or something like that, and it didn't work out, you can grab another longsword. But after the second longsword, you definitely want to get that revolver before cutlass if you can, and then you want to get the cutlass, and then you want to go straight to gunblade after that if you can. But if let's just say you're against someone oppressive, or like Zed went bot and got 2 kills, so now he's super strong, then you want to grab that arm guard and try and get your Zanyas earlier, possibly even before your gunblade, depending on how strong he is. If he's just a little bit stronger than you and you can get away with arm guard gunblade, definitely do that. But again, if he goes bot or he roams top and he gets a couple of kills and he gets really high up on you, you want to get that Zanyas off or out so that you can Zanyas his ult. So these are your mid-game items. You want to get boots somewhere, either right after you get gunblade, or if it's convenient, maybe you can get it earlier. They cost 800 gold though, so it's I like to get my gunblade first and then boots. And then obviously, like I said in the Zed example, if you need that Seekers or Zanyas, you want to get after that as well. So, but yeah, you want to get these somewhere, between getting these 2 items. And then after you have these 2 items, you can grab a Void Staff. You can also get Ludens or Rabadons here if they're not building any MR. But typically, if you're doing well at all, people will get any amount of MR. And Void Staff still gives 80 AP, it still gives a bunch of Magic Pen, and this isn't like Last Whisper where it's off bonus Magic Pen. It is all of your Magic Pen. It takes all of it into account, so it's still really good. You still want to get this. And once you have these 3 items, you are really, really strong in the game. regardless of like where the game is. You might not be like a super powerhouse that everyone's scared of if you're behind or something like that. Once you have these three items, you're a part of the game now, and you can start making things happen. On the other hand, after you get your Gunblade, if I'm like 8-2 or something like that, or I'm just having a killer game, you could skip straight to Ludens and skip these two items and then get them after Ludens. But that just means you're doing really, really well and you want to snowball your lead. Typically, though, after you get, or once you get these three items, you want to get Rabadons and then Ludens to end off, assuming that you don't need one of the situational defensive items that I have listed down here. I'm not going to really go through all of these, I'm just going to quickly mention them. Lichbane, I'm not a huge fan of Sheen, but it is viable, so I put it in there. It's not typically part of my build, but definitely worth it. QSS for someone like a Warwick, GA, if you're getting focused really hard, Banshees if they have a lot of poke. I'll talk about Youmuu's and Trinity Force because they're probably the most interesting ones on this list. If you get one, you have to get the other. And these are for if you're either a little bit behind or your team just as a whole is a little bit behind, regardless of how you're doing. This means you're going to be split pushing and looking to duel. The Youmuu's is going to help you take towers, and the Triforce is going to help you duel people. They only go together, so if you get one, you have to get the other. And they go along with these two items. So you would skip the Void Staff, and then you would get Triforce and Youmuu's right after the Gunblade and Zanya's. This is a really, really risky thing to do because you actually lose a lot of burst damage with this. But if your team's really far behind and you can't fight anyway, then the extra damage from Void Staff and all this, or even like a Rylai's or anything like that, isn't going to help you stay alive. Then you want to take these and you want to split push. And since Akali's isn't super bad at it, like she doesn't have an escape and she's not super mobile, but she is a super strong duelist and she has really good wave clear and tower clear. You can definitely get away with these items. So next, we'll go into the hard matchups, like against like LeBlanc, Brand, and things like that. Very similar starts. You notice I reordered these because these are supposed to be really hard matchups. So typically you're going to want to get that Doran Shield. If you're against someone like Brand, where you think you could dodge his pillar, then you want to go Boots. It's a little bit greedier, but if you're on top of your movement, then you can definitely get away with Boots and dodge, as long as you're dodging his pillar. But if you're not as mechanically intensive, and you're just playing Akali because she has a lot of point and click abilities, then definitely stick with the Doran Shield in matchups like that. And if you're feeling super greedy, I only do this if I'm like super confident in the matchup against AP, as I grab Longsword. It's for someone like even like Vel'Koz or something like that, someone who can still oppress you, but you think you can get away with it, then you try to grab that Longsword, but it's really, really risky. I wouldn't suggest it, seeing as though these are typically really, really hard matchups. You want to generally stick with these two items. But like I said, if you're feeling it, if you're feeling on top of your game, then you might want to try to get away with Longsword. But remember that you're going to have that Longsword for a really long time because your first buy against LeBlanc, every single time I play against LeBlanc, regardless of how good or bad I'm doing, I get Negatron Cloak. No matter what. I don't always get Abyssal first, but I always get Negatron Cloak on my first back because you need to survive that burst. Akali's sustain is really strong, and against those really oppressive lane bullies and things like that, they're typically squishy, like LeBlanc, Brand. Those are the two that come off the top of my head. I guess Vel'Koz. I wouldn't typically get this against Vel'Koz because he has a lot of true damage, but just another example. You always want to get that Negatron Cloak because they're typically squishy and doing, they do high damage and take a lot of damage. That's just how assassins work. So if you can survive through their damage, then you can jump back onto them and deal an equal amount of damage and actually sustain up. So you don't need the blasting one first. I didn't even put the blasting one here because I just wanted to stress how important it is that you get the Negatron Cloak first. After you have that, typically you want to get the Abyssal because it is a huge leg up from the Negatron Cloak. You're getting a lot of extra AP. You get that reduced magic resist by 20 for nearby enemies, which is super helpful. I think that's really underrated on how strong that is, especially when you get Sorc Shoes on top of that, because that's an extra 35 magic pen just from these two items flat. So if you're against someone like LeBlanc, who's going to be starting Ludens, she only has 40 MR. Now she only has 5 MR when she's next to you. So pretty strong, doing pretty much true damage. And then right after you have your Abyssal, you can either go straight for the Sorc Shoes, like I said, or you can try to get your Gunblade out quickly. Like if you have a couple of good backs, like if you back with 1200, then you can grab your revolver, and then you back with like 700, you can grab your double longsword, and you can try to get this. But if it's convenient, then just grab Sorc Shoes. They're still pretty strong. They give you that extra magic pen, and it stacks well with your Abyssal. And then, so I have two kind of sets of things. Let's just say you go back, you grab your Negatron Cloak at 0-0, and then you come back to lane, and you get 2 kills on the LeBlanc that you're against. If you're 2-0 in your lane, you want to get that Gunblade as soon as possible. You want to grab a Ludens because you want to snowball that lead against the Assassin and keep them down. Grab your Rabadons and your Void Staff to get really on top of the damage. However, let's just say you die before you're able to get your Negatron Cloak early, and the Lee Sin comes in and kills you again right when you get your Negatron Cloak, so it's just not helping, and you're really upset, and you just can't do much. One, you want to look to roam there, because you're not going to be able to fight your lane opponent for a while. Secondly, you want to stick with these items typically, so that you don't feed. You want to grab that Zanya's Hourglass. I know this is against hard AP, but typically... like, let's just say LeBlanc presses QR. If you get Zanya's her Distortion, she won't get her ult proc, or like the second proc on her ult, and that'll reduce a lot of the damage. But you do have to be careful with stuff like that, because she can chain you because you're stationary while you're in Zanya's. And then you can grab a Rylai's. I'm not a fan of Rylai's particularly, but I do respect what it gives you. It gives you a lot of health, and as a defensive item, if you're doing poorly, it can definitely be very helpful. You still want to get your Gunblade because you still want that extra spell vamp, and it's an item that you can't really skip on Akali, in my opinion. I think that if you're skipping Gunblade, you're doing it wrong. I know there's like arguments about like getting Sheen instead of Gunblade early and things like that. And I just think that you need a Gunblade eventually in your build, unless you're just doing really horribly and you want to go tankier. But even then, the extra spell vamp is going to make you tankier and give you that damage. So I think it's an item that if you skip, you're doing it wrong. Spirit's Visage is another great item that I think is kind of undersold on Akali. Since she has such great spell vamp, the increased healing from Spirit's Visage, or increased self-healing. Oh, increased all healing now. Okay, cool. Anyways, it gives you a lot of MR, so if you're doing poorly against that LeBlanc, it's going to help you against the burst. And if you're, it's going to give you health, so it's going to help against everyone, including the AD champions. It's going to be CDR, which is actually pretty okay. I'm not like huge on CDR on Akali, but I mean it can be helpful. We've all been there with that half second left on our Shroud cooldown that we needed, and things like that. So, and it's just going to amplify your spell vamp by a lot. If you can get away with it, I would like to get Spirit's Visage after my Gunblade, but if you're just really getting wrecked, you can grab like a Spectre's, and then look to get another item, and if you're still getting wrecked, you can grab your Spirits, and then look to get another item. Then lastly, let's just say that you had a AP lane, but it's the Darius top or whatever that's doing super well. I don't know if Darius is the best. Let's just say Renekton top that's doing super well, and he's like 6-0 in top lane at the 15-minute mark. Then grabbing an Iceborne Gauntlet is actually pretty strong. I'm not a huge advocate of Sheen items, but I do respect what they give you, and Iceborne Gauntlet is a really convenient way of getting armor while still kind of getting away with getting damage. So this would be helpful. Like, let's just say you were doing fine against LeBlanc, like it's 1-1 or you know, something like that, or you're 1-0 or something, and you don't need that extra MR for after Abyssal. Then you can definitely get Iceborne for that, you know, super fed top laner or AD carry or whatever. And this will still give you the damage to snipe the Caitlyn or Vayne or whoever their AD carry is, while still kind of getting through the Renekton and all things like that. And then it's very similar to the situational items. QSS for someone like Warwick. GA is always good. Hunting Guys is meh at best, but I put it in there because, you know, it is an item that you can get. I threw Zanya's and Void Staff here on at the end because even though they're listed up here, regardless of which build you get, you're definitely, or not definitely, but most likely going to want your Zanya's and Void Staff at the end of these builds. You can't always get all of them. Like if I'm doing super well, if I'm like 10 and 2 on Akali, I might skip the Zanyas because I can just run in and one shot everyone. But if you get CC'd at all, or if you kind of get stuck in a bad spot, Zanyas can help your team catch up. Even if you are super ahead, the Zanyas can help you kind of reset your position and like help you with the dies and things like that. So still strong on the offensive build, and Void Staff, of course, is a good way of getting damage when you can't afford like a Rabadons or things like that, or if they're super tanky. Let's just say Mundo's doing super well in the top lane instead of the Renekton, but you're still doing poorly against the LeBlanc. You still kind of want to go with this build, and then you kind of throw a Void Staff on at the end. Just tack that on at the end, and you can at least contribute some amount of damage to your team. Alright, next it's going to be a very, very similar build, but it's going to be against AD. So it's very intuitive. It's kind of how you would think it would go. You start Cloth Armor. I could have put Longsword and everything here, but I'm thinking of more specific matchups than like a good Zed. I'm more thinking of like Jace or Lucian. Like those kinds of matchups is what you would be doing this build for. You want to start off getting that Seekers. I threw the Zanyas and the Seekers in here instead of just throwing Zanyas here, because if you can get the Seekers and then get away with Gunblade, then that's great. But typically against someone like Jace or Lucian who's really oppressing you in the laning phase, it's really hard to get away with that. So typically, most of the time, you're going to want to get your Zanyas first and then go into Gunblade. So if you're doing well and if you're doing poorly, it's very similar. So if you're doing well, it's actually exactly the same, you'll notice, because my examples, Jace and Lucian, are both squishy champions that do a lot of damage, so you want to get that Ludens out early and turn it around on them when you're up 2-0 already and things like that. You can go bot and top and try and snowball those lanes as well. The extra move speed helps, all that. And then if you're doing poorly is the one that's a little bit different, because we're focusing more on armor instead of MR. Again, you see this Iceborne pop up. Like I said before, it's a good way of kind of sneaking damage in with your defense. You can get that Sheen proc, and like especially if like you're like 1-1 or something like that, and you're not really sure how it's gonna go, you can grab the Sheen, and then if you start doing poorly, you could kind of turn that into an Iceborne. So it's a safe route to go. And then you still want your Gunblade, like always, and Zanya's. And if you're doing super poorly, you can grab like a Deadman's or even a Randuin's. I didn't throw it in here, but you can grab like a Randuin's as well. But typically, if you already have the Iceborne, the extra health on Deadman's is going to be the way to go. I know it got nerfed recently, but I still think Deadman's is the way to go. Could be wrong about that. Armor and health is what you're looking for in this last spot for a defensive armor item. And then for the situational items, I threw Rylai's in here for more health, because you're not getting a lot of health out of anything other than Deadman's here. GA is always good, QSS for all the same reasons. And then I threw Abyssal on Banshees on the end here in case, the Fit jungle or something like that is doing well. Or maybe they have like an Annie top or something, I've seen that before. Then Banshees can definitely be super helpful in those matchups. But I threw them on the end because typically this is against, when the AD is fed or you're against a hard AD lane. Alright, next we're getting into the... this is a more innovative build that I made. I made this back when Soraka top was super popular, back when her Star Call hit everything around her, and she could heal herself and all that kind of stuff. That's when this build came out, because I couldn't kill Soraka with my typical build, so I needed some kind of way to beat a champion like that. So this works against similar champions. I know that Soraka doesn't exist anymore, but like an AD Mal's top, like if you're taking top lane Akali or something like that, this can actually be super helpful in lanes like that. What this build is designed to do is it's supposed to make you really beefy, and it's also supposed to give you a super strong early mid game. You fall off super quickly with this, but typically this is going to give you a super strong early mid game that you can just pretty much wreck everyone. You're going to be the strongest person on the map, even if you're not super far ahead, just from the amount of half items that you have. The problem with this build, though, is that you don't scale very well, like, other than being kind of a disrupting person in the middle of the fight. So you're not going to be, you're not going to be sniping anybody, but you'll definitely survive a while in the fight. So you'll see the start's pretty much the same. I had a ruby crystal because we're going to get haunting guys as our first item as opposed to revolver. Haunting guys is a little bit overrated in my opinion, not on Akali specifically, but just as an item. I don't much like it, but for what it does, it gives you a super strong early game spike. It's more expensive now, so I don't know if this build is as strong as it used to be, because this was only 1400 before, or something like that. I think it was 1400. So now that it costs more, I'm not sure how strong it is anymore. I haven't done this build in a while. Since, like, I haven't done it in Season 6. So, but typically what the build was is you want to grab the haunting guys and the sheen. This is going to give you magic pen, so your Q is going to be doing more damage, and then your Q auto is going to be doing a ridiculous amount of damage because of the sheen proc, and the sheen's also be doing physical damage on its own, which I know is kind of counterintuitive against the magic pen, but it's just going to give you a lot of hybrid damage really early. So if they don't have super high resistances, this will shred through both their armor and MR at the same time, and they'll be doing a whole bunch of damage. After you get these two items, you want to get boots actually next. This isn't just kind of thrown in there. This is going to get a stack with your other magic pen on your haunting guys to give you 30 flat magic pen, and that's going to be really strong. And then I threw both of these in. You can't get all 5 of these items before you get a full item, but like if you need the extra sustain in a lane, like if you're against someone with a dot, like my 80 Mal's example earlier, the haunting guys is something you'd still want to start, but instead of getting sheen, you might want to get like the revolver for the sustain or something like that. Or if you're against, like a Renekton or something, instead of getting the sheen, you might get a Seekers. But anyways, after you have these 3 items, or haunting guys and one of these 2 items, you want to look to get your Gunblade pretty early. This is more or less an order of how you want to do it. This is going to make you super, super beefy, but remember that your damage is not going to scale as well. You're not going to have Rabadons, and you're not going to have Void Staff, typically. So, you're going to get your Gunblade, then you're going to grab Rylai's, then Lichbane, and then Zanya's. Typically in that order. You could move Zanya's forward any amount for when you need it. There's never a wrong time to build Zanya's when you need it. Like, the only time that I would say it's wrong to build Zanya's is if you're like 10 and 2 and you just don't need it. Unless they're like CCing you super hard. But typically this is the order in which you want to get the build. And then you kind of want to end off with some MR, so like an Abyssal or a QSS or even a banner can make you just super survivable. Super... You last a long time in fights. I don't have a good way of saying that, but like you're just really beefy in the middle of the fight. So having an MR item with the extra health from both Rylai's and haunting guys. You'll notice that I didn't put Liandry's here. I put it down here. It's because you don't want to get Liandry's really ever. It's kind of like the last item that you get. I feel like the power up from haunting guys gives everything you want, and the Liandry's just kind of amplifies it a little bit. You can get the Liandry's a little bit earlier, but I think it's weaker. I think you should just stick with the haunting guys. Also, I threw in the Void Staff and the Rabadons. Like if you start doing super well, maybe you skip the Rylai's and you replace it for Rabadons, or even sell the haunting guys for a Void Staff or something like that in the late game. Definitely a good choice when the flat magic pen starts to fall off. Alright, so now we get on to the less strong builds. The more trolly ones, the more fun ones. I don't really know what order to put these in, as like worst to best or best to worst, so... but these next 3 builds are a bit more on the trolley side, a bit weaker in my opinion. And so we'll start off with Jungle Akali. I'm not a fan of Jungle Akali. It forces you to get sheen, and I don't know. I just think that overall it's not the best. It's just I feel like she's stronger in lane. I know that she has an oppressive lane, and if you can get through that lane, would be great, but she takes a long time to get going from the jungle. She has to be level 6 before she can get a decent gank off. She's a lot like Diana, but unlike Diana, is the like your ganking potential really relies on your team CC as opposed to your own CC. So overall, just not really my favorite. Really susceptible to counter jungle. Just a lot of things could go wrong. You could make it work. I've done it before because I just wanted to play Akali. Akali's my best champion, and I just wanted to make it work. So it's not the worst thing, but if you're gonna do it, this is how I suggest you do it. I think this is the better one to get, other than the what's it called? Hunter's Talisman. I think Machete is the way to go. Pretty sure. I'm not positive about that. If someone gave me an argument for Hunter's Talisman, I could believe it, but I think Machete is the way to go. And you want to grab the refillable potion, obviously, and get your Hunter's Potion as soon as possible. You want to finish off your jungle item really early. I say Red Smite is the best. I thought about it for a really long time, whether Red Smite or Blue Smite would be better. Green Smite would definitely work if you wanted the wards. I don't feel like Green Smite is ever really the wrong choice, but typically, since you're an assassin, you're looking to get the kills, but Red or Blue Smite is generally better. I picked Red Smite because, one, if you get invaded by the jungler, this is going to help you duel the jungler. Two, when you're ganking, the Blue Smite isn't... You're either going to be able to ult to him or you're not. Your ult and smite range are very similar. I think your ult range is actually longer than your smite range, so the smite's not really going to help you get in range. I guess if they had someone with Ghost, Blue Smite would be better. And that's like the only thing that I can think of where Blue Smite really has a big advantage. It would give you a little bit more instant damage, but I mean, it's not like you're using Blue Smite to burst people down, so I think overall Red Smite is going to give you the more damage and the better buy. Then you want to get boots early because you're jungling, so you want to be mobile. You want to get Runeglaive, obviously. I mean, I guess you could go Warrior, but that sounds bad. Sounds bad. And then you want to get your Gunblade for the sustain. I feel like once you have Gunblade on Jungle Akali, you're pretty strong, because you have your Sheen proc and your Gunblade. You got your Gunblade slow and things like that. I think that you're actually doing well. It's just going to take you a long time to get there, and by that time, it might not be strong anymore, depending on how well you're doing, how well you're farming, if you get invaded, if you get any kills, any assists, etc., etc. Since we're kind of committed on this whole, Sheen Gunblade, I suggested Luden's before Zanya's because just more damage all the time. You're going to need to burst your opponents when you get there. So you're not going to have any extra CC other than your Gunblade to keep them there. So you want to keep that damage going. Then you want to definitely get that Zanya's right after, in case you need to dive or anything like that. And then it's just very similar to the mid lane build where you're getting Rabadons and Void Staff and things like that. Then we get, I put Rylai's here in the end game because it could work. Actually, I'm gonna throw this down here into the situational items because I feel like this is like if you're not doing well, if you're not snowballing at all, then you want to get Rylai's instead of like a Rabadon's or instead of even a Luden's. And then the situation items are pretty much all the same. I threw Jinsu's in there because I think it could help your weight or your jungle clear a little bit. With Runeglaive and your E, jungle clearing shouldn't really be a problem, but maybe you can do something fun with Jinsu's. I don't really know. This is more of a trolley build anyway, so. Next, we're going to go into Hybrid Akali, which is probably the most fun build out of all of them, but also definitely one of the worst. But a lot of people don't see it coming, which is the biggest strength in this build. People just think you're going flat AP. So you could definitely make this work if you really are. I don't even want to say that. Like, it can work if you catch people off guard. That's what I should say. But typically, you shouldn't really rely on this build. This shouldn't be your core Akali build. Maybe once out of every 10 Akali games, you maybe throw this into a normals game. I wouldn't even really do this in rank that often unless you were trying to go like a tankier top lane and you already picked Akali, like you picked Akali and someone like locks in mid and says fuck you, because it's solo queue. That's the only time that I'd really do this in ranked. So you want to go longsword start because we're hybrid and we want to get some AD. If you can get away with Cutlass first, try it. it's way more expensive now, so you might have to just start with the revolver, but you definitely want to get that gunblader early. You can actually, I'm actually going to throw this on this side, because getting that Tiamat pretty early, like even before colors, like if you back with 1250 and just grab a Tiamat, that could be really strong, but you still want to make sure that you're getting the gunblade sometime in the as early as possible. It's going to give you a lot of sustain, it's going to give you mixed damage, and it's just really strong. Then you want Triforce as your Sheen item. It doesn't give AP anymore, but it still gives a lot of other stuff that can work. It's not a must buy. There's actually another item a little bit lower that you can get instead of Triforce if you're doing a slightly different build. So this is like a bit more aggressive if you want to get like, you know, the Gunblade and the Tiamat. And then if you're brawling a lot, like autoing or split pushing, then you want to grab Youmu's and Jinsu's. You're still using your Q auto E's and things like that, but auto attacks are going to mean a lot more the more you're brawling. But if you're looking more for like dueling and bursting, or you're looking to still assassinate the backline in team fights and things like that as opposed to split push, then you want to get Tiamat, Death Stance, and or IE. IE is kind of like a troll, like I'm killing everyone and I'm already 6-0 here, I'm getting an IE. It's kind of really greedy, but you can definitely get away with it. Also, as a side note, I would still go Thunderlords because it's broken as fuck. So don't go 18-12 on 80 or anything like that. I would still suggest Thunderlords. And lastly, we have a tankish build. So instead of Triforce, this is what I was talking about earlier. You can get Black Cleaver instead of Triforce. That way you're not doubling up on the Phage procs. Mama Mortius would be really strong. And if you got, if you're going for like this tankier style where you're getting, you know, Black Cleaver and Frozen Mallet and things like that, then grabbing Titanic instead of Ravenous can give you a whole lot of burst on your first Q auto with the Titanic proc, but you need some health to make that worth it. And then the situational items are pretty intuitive, pretty much the same. The only ones that are really different here are Randuin's and Sterix. The reason why I threw Sterix in here is because if you get this tankier build, grabbing a Sterix could help you survive. I wouldn't get this on, you know, like every game, definitely. That's why it's in the situational items. But, you know, I think you can make it work in this tankier build. And for our last one, this is probably the worst Akali build I put in here. But I've done it before, and it's actually pretty fun to do. And that is the Sustain Akali build. So this is where you get both Gunblade and Will of the Ancients. So naturally you want to rush both of them out as quickly as possible and get that double sustain going. The only problem with this build though is that the amount of sustain you get from both of these you could get from just one of them and getting more damage, like a Ludens or a Rabadons instead of Will of the Ancients. But Will of the Ancients is cheaper, so, you know, I guess you can make it work. I would not start Will of the Ancients, even though it is cheaper, because Gunblade's just going to give you more of everything. It's going to give you, you know, some lifesteal, it's going to give you some more damage, and more damage equates to more spell vamp. So, definitely Gunblade first. And then, since we're going for this double sustain build, I think that Lichbane is the way to go here. You can kind of mix these up pretty much any way you want. You can grab Ludens first and all that, but I think Lichbane's the way to go. I threw Ludens on the back, not because it would be the last item that you get, but because it's like the lowest priority. Only get Ludens if you're doing really well. Otherwise, just skip Ludens altogether and move on to the situational items. Grab like either an Abyssal, Azanya's, even a Ma would be really good with the Lifeline passive, getting extra lifesteal and all that kind of stuff. Could be super helpful. Plus 10% lifesteal, plus 10% spell vamp. It gives you a bunch of healing. It's actually ridiculous. I've done this once or twice before, where you do like one Q auto and you get like 800 health or something like that for the amount of damage you're doing with the Lichbane proc plus all of the spell vamp. It's actually pretty awesome. But the situation items are pretty intuitive, just like the other ones. Oh yeah, one thing I did forget to mention. I'm more or less done with this build, so I'm just going to move on. Like I said, it's more or less the worst build. That's why I kind of put the least amount of thought into it. But for this one thing I did forget to mention for these early game items, I threw Elixir of Sorcery right here, very specifically because since you're going for that early mid-game pressure, you definitely want to get that Elixir of Sorcery right at level 9 to snowball your lead as much as possible. If you can't get a kill with it, don't buy it, obviously, but if like you're really close to getting a couple of kills or you're looking to roam, picking up this elixir sorcery can definitely help you out in getting that extra burst damage and helping you snowball, get 1 or 2 more kills, and setting up these next mid game items. So anyways, overall, those are my builds. I think I went from more or less best to worst. I kind of ended with the more trolley builds, but you know, I think all of these builds are more or less viable. Like those last 3, the hybrid jungle and sustain Akali builds, are more for like normal games. But I'm sure there are a couple of situations where you could make them work and kind of have fun with them. The sustained Akali build is probably the one exception where I feel like it's just weaker in every way to my normal Akali build. You get less spell vamp, not because you have less spell vamp, but because you just do less damage, so it just like kind of evens out. So now you're doing less damage for the same amount of spell vamp. It's just, it's cheaper, and that's like the one big plus to it, but overall I think that you would be better off just sticking with my main build. However, I do use both these first AD and first AP builds along with my main build, and I used to use this build a lot back when Soraka was really popular in a solo lane. Now that she's not, I haven't really used this build since. But if you're looking to be beefier, it can definitely work out. Same thing with this tankier Akali build, the tankish Akali setup. This is gonna actually work better than this whole 80 thing. This is more for like trolling and normals and for fun. But this can actually work in a ranked game if you're top and you kind of lack like you picked Akali top and your jungler and mid and support are all squishy and you feel obligated to go tankier. This can actually work out pretty decently, assuming the matchup is okay for it. If you're against a squishier top laner, like for instance Fiora or something like that, then you kind of still want to stick with the AP builds. But if you're against someone like, I don't know, Zac or someone tanky, Malphite, Renekton, anyone like that, then you can probably get away with this tankier build. Anyways, all that being said, tell me what you guys think. Do you have any adjustments to my builds that you guys would make? Maybe the situational items you think are more important? Do you guys like Sheen more than I do? I know I'm a little biased about it. Do you guys think that Gunblade is less important than I do? I just feel like Gunblade is just such a strong item on Akali that it's just necessary. But tell me what you guys think in the comments below. Tell me, am I right? Am I wrong? I think I'm right. I know I'm right. I'm always right when it comes to Akali. She's my bae. I know everything when it comes to Akali. So, anyways, don't forget to hit that like button, and I hope to see you guys on the next one. Peace.